Some drinks have survived for centuries without most people ever stopping to think about how they're actually made. Cider is one of them. In many places, it's part of the culture, the harvest, and the everyday life of people who've lived alongside apples for generations. And behind every bottle, there's a process that's ancient, precise, and far more fascinating than it seems. And here's the question almost no one asks: what exactly defines a cider? Welcome to Factories and Facts. Today, you're about to discover that behind this simple traditional drink lies a process far more complex and far more global than it first appears. And we're starting by breaking an important myth. Even though many people confuse cider with sparkling wine, it is not sparkling wine, it is not Prosecco, and it is definitely not champagne. Cider is a fermented drink made from apples. And yes, that changes everything. In fact, if in the last episode here on the channel we saw how raisins go through an extreme dehydration process until they become almost a completely different food, something just as curious happens here, only in the opposite direction. Instead of removing water, the industry transforms the apple's natural sugar into alcohol and carbonation through a process humanity has mastered for centuries. Cider existed long before modern bottled versions. Across several regions of Europe, it has always been tied to farming, apple harvests, and natural fermentation. Over time, different places adapted this drink to their own customs and preferences. In some cases, it became drier. In others, sweeter, lighter, or more intense. And that's what turned cider into a drink with many identities, yet the same foundation: apples, fermentation, and control. In some places, it's part of daily life. In others, it shows up at gatherings, local traditions, or specific occasions. But it almost always carries the same idea: an ancient, accessible drink deeply tied to the transformation of fruit. But before we understand why cider can be so different from one place to another, we need to take a step back and answer this properly. What defines a real cider? At what point does it become different from sparkling wine? And how does a simple apple turn into this fizzy drink? That's what you're about to find out. And if you enjoy discovering how things are really made, subscribe to Factories and Facts. Because the process that begins here runs through agriculture, heavy industry, chemical control, and even comparisons with beverage factories around the world. Now tell me, had you ever stopped to think that cider starts in exactly the same way as several of the world's most famous drinks? To truly understand cider, the first thing we need to do is clear up the confusion surrounding these bubbly drinks. Cider is essentially a fermented beverage made from apple juice, and that's it. No grapes, no wine must, and by definition, none of the same base used in classic sparkling wines. Its origin lies in the fruit, the natural sugar, and the work of yeast. That is exactly what separates cider from drinks like sparkling wine, Prosecco, and champagne. Sparkling wine, for example, begins as wine. First the grapes become wine, then that wine goes through an additional step to develop carbonation. Prosecco follows its own methods, usually with controlled fermentation in large tanks. Champagne, meanwhile, goes through one of the longest and most prized processes in the beverage world, with a second fermentation taking place inside the bottle itself. Cider follows a different path. It's more direct, simpler at its core, and precisely because of that, more adaptable. In many countries such as France, Spain, and England, traditional cider tends to be drier, less sweet, and often even cloudy. In some regions, it's treated almost like a craft beverage. Each harvest changes a little, each producer leaves a personal signature, and the flavor varies depending on the type of apple used. In other markets, that model was adjusted to appeal to a broader audience. In those cases, consumers tend to prefer drinks that are smoother, sweeter, and easier to enjoy. and that is exactly what shaped many industrial versions of modern cider. Instead of relying only on acidity and rustic character, the industry began refining the process to create a drink that is sweeter, more stable, and more consistent year after year. That adjustment does not happen by accident. It starts with the choice of apples, continues through strict sugar control during fermentation, and ends with flavor standardization. Also, the drink always has the same profile, the one consumers expect when they open the bottle. And this is where many people are surprised. Even though it is seen as a simple drink, cider demands major technical decisions. If too much sugar ferments, the alcohol content rises and the flavor changes. If too little ferments, the drink becomes overly sweet. If the carbonation is not carefully controlled, bottle pressure can vary too much. In other words, this is not improvisation, it is process engineering. And that characteristic, control, repetition, and scale, is what allowed cider to stop being just an agricultural drink and also become a large-scale industrial product across different markets. But all of that is only possible because of one element that almost never gets the attention it deserves: the apple. Before it becomes a beverage, before it gains carbonation and a label, cider begins in the orchard. It begins with the choice of fruit, the timing of the harvest, and the decisions that determine how much sugar that apple will deliver. And that's what you're about to see now. We're going to follow the apple's full journey, from the orchard to the start of fermentation, because it's there, long before the bottle, that cider's fate already begins to be shaped. Before cider exists, there is the field. And more specifically, there are apples on an industrial scale. Unlike what many people imagine, the apples used for cider are not necessarily the flawless fruit you see on grocery store shelves. In the beverage industry, what matters most is not appearance, but the balance of sugar, acidity, and juice yield. Harvest takes place during well-defined times of the year, when the apples reach their ideal stage of ripeness. If they are picked too early, the sugar has not fully developed yet. If they stay on the tree too long, the fruit begins to lose acidity. Man, that compromises the entire profile of the drink. After harvest comes the first major stage of control: sorting. Machines and workers remove fruit that is too damaged, rotten, or contaminated. Minor cosmetic flaws are not a problem. What cannot enter the process is anything that could affect flavor or fermentation. Next, these apples move on to transport. And here, one detail matters: time. The faster the fruit reaches the plant, the lower the oxidation and the greater the retention of its natural sugars. In larger operations, everything is timed, so the apples leave the orchard and reach the processing line within just a few hours. Once at the factory, the apples go through an intensive wash. Water jets, rotating brushes, and filtration systems remove dirt, leaves, and invisible residues. Only after that is the fruit ready to be transformed. The next step is crushing. The apples are crushed into a wet mass, almost like a thick pulp. This stage is crucial because it dramatically increases the fruit's surface area, making juice extraction much easier. That mass then moves to industrial presses, which apply controlled pressure to separate the liquid from the solid fibers. The result is a raw juice, still cloudy, loaded with natural sugar, acids, and aromatic compounds that will define the character of the cider. This is where the transformation truly begins. This juice does not become a beverage on its own. It needs the action of yeast. Yeast consumes the apple's sugar and turns it into alcohol and carbon dioxide. But unlike what happens in artisanal processes, in industry, nothing is left to chance. Fermentation takes place in giant tanks with strict temperature control. If the temperature rises too much, the yeast works too fast and the flavor becomes unbalanced. If it drops too low, the process slows down and fermentation may not even finish. Beyond temperature, the industry controls time and, above all, how much sugar will remain in the liquid. That point is decisive for the final style of the cider. Stopping fermentation at exactly the right moment is what can guarantee a sweeter, lighter drink with lower alcohol content. In other words, cider's final profile is decided long before the bottle exists. At this stage of the process, the liquid is still far from looking like the bubbly drink we know. It is still being transformed, going through fine adjustments that will determine whether that cider will be drier, sweeter, or more balanced. And now that the apple has played its part, the process leaves the orchard behind and enters the heart of heavy industry. Next, you'll see how this fermented liquid gains carbonation, stability, consistency, and scale, using methods that are not exclusive to cider, but shared with sparkling beverage factories all over the world. Once apple fermentation is under control and the cider's profile begins to take shape, the process enters a decisive stage, turning that liquid into a stable, carbonated, standardized drink. This is where many people are surprised, because what happens next is not exclusive to cider. The process you're about to see from this point on is used in cider and sparkling beverage factories all over the world. The fermented liquid moves into large industrial stainless steel tanks. These tanks are not there just for storage. They function as fully controlled environments where pressure, temperature, and time are monitored constantly. In many industrial ciders, carbon dioxide does not come only from natural fermentation. It can also be adjusted artificially with precision to ensure that every bottle has the same amount of bubbles, the same pressure, and the same behavior when opened. This is very similar to what happens in sparkling wines made using the Charmat method, widely used in many parts of the world. In this method, the drink develops carbonation inside large pressurized tanks instead of fermenting slowly inside the bottle. The difference lies in the final goal. While premium sparkling wines aim for complexity, secondary aromas, and aging time, many industrial ciders aim for consistency, lightness, and ease of drinking. That is why the process can be faster, more direct, and more predictable. Another crucial point is filtration. Before moving on to bottling, the cider passes through systems that remove solid particles and fermentation residues. This ensures a visually clean, stable drink with a longer shelf life, something essential for products distributed on a large scale. After that comes the final standardization stage. Small adjustments in sugar, acidity, and carbonation are made so the flavor is exactly the same in any bottle, from any batch, in any year. This is where industry moves completely away from the artisanal model. In smaller productions, each harvest can vary a lot. In industry, consumers expect the experience to be repeatable. Opening the bottle today or much later should deliver the same sensation. And all of that happens before the drink ever touches the glass bottle. Once the cider is ready, it moves to high-speed bottling lines. Machines fill, seal, and test each bottle in a matter of seconds. Sensors check pressure, sealing, and liquid level to prevent failures. Even a tiny mistake at this stage can mean leaks, loss of carbonation, or even bottles bursting during transport. That is why control here is absolute. That same kind of industrial logic with tanks, pressure control, standardization, and speed is what connects cider to sparkling beverage factories across different parts of the world. The difference is not in the technology, it is in the intention. And that leads us straight to the next point, how this same process can create completely different drinks when the objective changes. When we look at this entire process, from fruit to tank, from control to bottling, it becomes clear that cider did not emerge in isolation. It is part of a global family of fermented and carbonated drinks, which includes sparkling wines produced in many countries around the world. At its core, the technology is remarkably similar. In parts of Europe, sparkling wine factories use pressurized tanks, fermentation control, and precise adjustments of carbonation and sugar. What changes is not the how, but the why. Premium drinks aim for complexity, aging time, more delicate aromas, and higher prices. Popular drinks, on the other hand, prioritize accessibility, consistency, and ease of drinking. And that is how many modern versions of cider found their place, as drinks designed to be shared, affordable, and predictable. A product that does not require any learning curve, does not demand technical context, and does not intimidate the person drinking it. You open it, pour it, and enjoy it. Simple as that. And it was exactly that simplicity that turned cider into something bigger than just a drink in many markets. It became a culturally recognizable product. Affordable price, steady shelf presence, a pleasant taste for different palates, and above all, consistency over time. Entire generations grew up with this kind of bottle on the table. And even people who do not drink cider often recognize that profile almost instantly. Very few drinks can do that. The strength of industrial cider is not in seeming sophisticated. It lies in being accessible, familiar, and easy to share. Because it has crossed generations without losing its main function, turning an agricultural product into a simple, recognizable, and widely consumed beverage. And the most fascinating part is realizing that behind this simple gesture, opening a bottle that is ready to drink, there is agriculture, industry, chemical control, logistics, and processes that connect orchards and beverage factories across many parts of the world, from the apple to the bottling line. And now tell me, did you ever imagine cider had this much engineering behind it? Let me know in the comments. And the next time you come across a bottle of cider, you'll know exactly what happened before it got there. If you enjoyed discovering what lies behind products that seem simple at first glance, subscribe to Factories and Facts, because here we show you how the world really works, from industry to everyday life. And if you think you've already seen it all, then you have no idea about the process we showed in our last episode. It should already be on your screen. Click it, and come with me to uncover another industrial secret here on Factories and Facts. A big hug. I'll see you there.